Powered by Riverside FM.
Welcome to another edition of Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. First of all, shout out to Realistic Randy. Glad to see you back on the podcast circuit with my guy Rap and SK the other night. Glad you're back on the air, my brother. For those of you who have not seen Realistic Randy's podcast or YouTube channel, check it out. His content is fire. What is going on with all of this Aaron Rodgers stuff? I know it's been talked about to exhaustion, but today I just want to get you to think a little bit, UP Nation. I know you're tired of hearing about the Aaron Rodgers stuff, but I want you to bear with me because the one thing about this show, when I envisioned it and started to create it, like I didn't just want to come on and talk sports. I just didn't want to come on and debate things. Yeah, we wanted to do a little bit of that, but I also wanted you to think about some of the sports talk topics out there realistically or maybe in a different way. So we're going to do this today with this whole Aaron Rodgers thing and beware of people that say this is not going to happen, that is not going to happen. Let me tell you something. The Minnesota Vikings inner circle is really tight. Those guys in the Vikings headquarters, they are not talking to anybody. So if anybody tries to play like they are a source or they know what's going to happen, it's fool's gold. It's fool's gold because the Vikings have done a really good job of not talking and letting you know what they're going to do. Did anybody see Jordan Mason coming from the San Francisco 49ers? There was nobody speculating on that. Why? Because the Vikings inner circle is pretty tight. So when I hear this is not going to happen, that ain't going to happen, man, it's fool's gold because nobody knows what's going to happen. But I want to dabble into this Aaron Rodgers thing, man. I want to dabble into kind of what I want to make you kind of see what the Vikings are thinking internally. I want to kind of make you see what Aaron Rodgers may be thinking internally because nobody really knows. So the best thing you can do is kind of, look at the equation, put the puzzle pieces together, and come up with your best hypothesis, so to speak. I think this whole thing started last year with Daniel Jones. I mean, think about it. The Vikings last year were at a point where they knew that JJ McCarthy was going to be their QB1, or at least they hoped that JJ McCarthy was going to be their QB1 starting this upcoming season. That was the plan. I don't think anybody thought that Sam Darnold would come in and have as great of a season as he had last year. But even with that, at the end of this whole thing, you could tell that the Minnesota Vikings weren't really 1,000% on board with Sam Darnold. I would even push back that if Sam Darnold came back for a reasonable price, that he would not have been even guaranteed a starting spot with the Minnesota Vikings. That's how strongly the Minnesota Vikings wanted JJ McCarthy. Just think about the season that Sam Darnold had and where he is now in Seattle. The Minnesota Vikings just let him go. And there was a lot of NFL analysts out there just talking about how can the Minnesota Vikings let him walk? Well, the Minnesota Vikings let Sam Darnold walk because of JJ McCarthy. 3/4 of the way during the year, what did the Minnesota Vikings do? Daniel Jones was released from the New York Giants. The Minnesota Vikings picked him up. What does that say now? The Minnesota Vikings just didn't pick Daniel Jones up for the heck of picking him up. I don't think there was any expectation of Daniel Jones to play in the playoffs last year. I think they were looking ahead. I think this is what Kwesi does well. I think this is what Kevin O'Connell does well. And they were looking ahead to this year, hoping that Daniel Jones would see enough where he would want to be a backup to JJ McCarthy. Better yet, a really, really good insurance policy for JJ McCarthy just in case that knee didn't hold up or if JJ McCarthy wasn't ready to go. There was a monkey wrench thrown into that game plan when Daniel Jones decided to leave. Daniel Jones, you can only speculate, thought I have a better chance at playing with the Colts than I do the Minnesota Vikings. And I'm not sure I'm ready to be a backup in this league yet. I want to play. So Daniel Jones, which is well within his right, went to the Colts, and that left a void in the Minnesota Vikings QB2 room. Nick Mullins left. So now the Minnesota Vikings really are void of a QB2 unless you feel like Rippon is up for the job. And I don't think a lot of people think that Rippon, even though he's shown flashes of being a pretty good quarterback, I don't think anybody is comfortable with him at QB2. Then you have a situation where, okay, now the speculation becomes we can sign Joe Flacco or we can sign Ryan Tannehill. And those were the two names in terms of free agency that were thrown out the most when it came to the Vikings QB2 spot. Now, keep in mind, Ryan Tannehill came in for a visit. Ryan Tannehill hasn't played in almost 2 years. Came in for a visit. And if the Vikings wanted to sign Ryan Tannehill, they could have got that done. They could have got that done because Ryan Tannehill did not play for a team last year, so he doesn't count towards the whole compensatory pick formula. So when Ryan Tannehill came for a visit here and left, I think the majority of the people thought that maybe the Vikings are looking elsewhere. And I'm going to get to how this ties in with Aaron Rodgers. So the name kept getting thrown out in terms of Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's going to be a guy. They must have something in place for Joe Flacco. They're going to sign him after the draft so he doesn't count against the compensatory pick formula. There were a lot of people, a lot of analysts, a lot of content creators in terms of following the Vikings that were throwing that hypothesis out there. I was one of those. But this is a lesson for everybody. Nobody knows. And this is what I'm talking about. The Minnesota Vikings aren't talking. Doogie Wilson, who was on Purple Daily, and I love the Purple Daily guys, mentioned the other day that the Minnesota Vikings haven't even been in conversation with Joe Flacco and his representation. Joe Flacco's representation has been trying to reach out to the Vikings because they think that Joe Flacco would be a perfect fit for the Minnesota Vikings. They didn't get any sort of communication with the Minnesota Vikings. Thus, Joe Flacco just signed with the Cleveland Browns. So all the speculation that it was going to be Joe Flacco coming to the Purple, and that's who they were negotiating with strongly, had something in place, that was not even the case. That was not even the case. I was really surprised to hear that, UP Nation. I was really surprised to hear that. So now enters the whole Aaron Rodgers thing. Albert Breer wrote a great article yesterday. Maybe it was a couple days ago, man. I don't know if it was yesterday. But he wrote something basically saying that Aaron Rodgers reached out to the Minnesota Vikings with a pitch. And the pitch was, hey, we can have a 1-year shot at this thing. We can go win a Lombardi trophy with me. I would be willing to mentor JJ McCarthy. And that's big because Aaron Rodgers has said in the past that it's not his job really to mentor anybody. But that was part of his pitch, that he would come in, be the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, help win a Lombardi trophy, something that the Minnesota Vikings have never done, and at the same time, help mentor J.J. McCarthy. With all that being said, that's a pretty great pitch by Aaron Rodgers. 4 times MVP, Super Bowl champion, wanting to do that for your organization, take your organization somewhere where you have never gone. But even staring that in the face, Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, and the fellas said no to Aaron Rodgers, which is paving the way for J.J. McCarthy to be the starting quarterback for 2025 season. The question is, after hearing that and making that public, my question becomes, why in the heck is Aaron Rodgers waiting? See, I'm trying to piece the puzzle together. Here's what I know about Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the most arrogant SOBs on the planet. And he has an ego as big as Texas. And I know this last year with the Jets doesn't sit well with him. And I've been on board. I'm not like other people that says Aaron Rodgers is garbage, that he can't play anymore. I have not seen the evidence of that. And so people that are saying that about Aaron Rodgers, I would argue, put together a compilation of all of his throws last year. And instead of picking pieces of games where he didn't play well, look at his whole body of work over the past 3 years. His whole body of work over the past 3 years is not garbage. You could try to make that narrative as much as you want, but it just wouldn't be very accurate. Has he been MVP level? Absolutely no. But has he been garbage? Absolutely not. So there's that ego thing. And I know he doesn't want to go out with the Jets being his last hurrah. So I believe that he reached out to the Minnesota Vikings. Hell, I would too. Look at the roster. Revamped offensive line, defensive line, weapons, Brian Flores, defense coordinator, KOC, offensive mind, you name it. The Minnesota Vikings are pretty strong in that area. So if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm making that phone call too. But after he had that phone call and the Minnesota Vikings told him no, you would think a guy who I feel like really wants to play, and I'm not buying into, well, I don't want to go to the training camps or anything like that. Man, you don't know what you don't know. Anybody that's speculating that is the case, when's the last time you talked to Aaron Rodgers? When's the last time you talked to his representation or Mike Tomlin? It's just building a narrative that you don't know anything about. So I'm not going to buy that he doesn't want to come to training camp or the OTAs or any of that stuff. I'm not buying that he is waiting for that, because if Aaron Rodgers is waiting in that, he is putting his chances of playing in jeopardy. The longer he waits, the better chance that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to make a move. The more he waits, the better chance that the New Orleans Saints, who's come out and said David Carr might not be ready to go next year, that they're going to go a different route. The longer he waits, the better chance that somebody is going to take one of these rookie quarterbacks. So to me, it doesn't make sense. It's not in Aaron Rodgers' best interest to wait. Unless, honestly, he really doesn't care about playing at all next year, which, again, I don't know Aaron Rodgers, but I'm speculating that he wants to play another year. His ego doesn't want him to go out like he did against the New York Jets. UP Nation, are you following me? So I believe he wants to play. So the Minnesota Vikings told him no. Why isn't he signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers? There are two reasons why he isn't signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think they're both valid. Number one, if you put Aaron Rodgers on that roster, what does that really do for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Does that make them in the Super Bowl conversation? I don't think it does. I think it makes them a good team. I think it makes them possibly a playoff team. I just don't think it makes them a Super Bowl team. I think it will be kind of like the whole Jets situation. Everything is in place, but that thing could go south pretty fast, and I don't think Aaron Rodgers wants that again. I think he is going to stay away from those type of situations. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are that type of situation. There is no guarantees there. You can't compare the Pittsburgh Steelers roster to the Minnesota Vikings roster. Now the New Orleans Saints has come about. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to sign there because, again, putting Aaron Rodgers on the Saints, what is that? What does that do for him? That doesn't put the New Orleans Saints in the conversation of possibly winning a title. And that is what Aaron Rodgers wants. So why not sign with the Steelers? I just gave you a reason why I don't think he wants to sign with the Steelers. Why not just retire if there's not a perfect place for you where you can win, and the Minnesota Vikings have told you no? I would love to know the conversation, and we'll never know this, but I would love to know the conversation. The last conversation that KOC and Aaron Rodgers had in terms of the possibilities of him suiting up in purple. I hope I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me the only way you wait is if there is a little bit of hope. The only way you jeopardize your future and your ability to be able to sign with other teams is during that conversation, there had to be something that gave Aaron Rodgers a little bit of hope. Like that is just, it's common sense. So he's like this phantom. He's this ghost that is hovering around the Minnesota Vikings franchise and headquarters. Because for all intents and purposes, the Minnesota Vikings have put this to bed, right? We're rolling with JJ McCarthy, right? Man, if that's the case, what the heck is Aaron Rodgers waiting for? I don't buy he's waiting for JJ to get hurt. The odds of that happening again with that meniscus repair, unless somebody bangs into JJ's knee, something freak, God forbid, it's a long shot. JJ McCarthy getting hurt again. I also think it's a long shot for JJ McCarthy to come into OTAs and come into training camp playing like hot garbage. Like, I don't see that happening either. Like I said, I think the young man's floor is average, and I think his ceiling is greatness, if that makes sense, UP Nation. So for me, the longer the Minnesota Vikings stay away from Aaron Rodgers and the longer that Aaron Rodgers has to wait, I think it puts his career in jeopardy. The second part of this is there really doesn't seem any sense of urgency with the Minnesota Vikings to sign a number 2. Whatever that is, whatever the philosophy is behind that, man, I trust KOC and I trust Kwesi. And if they don't have a sense of urgency to sign a number 2, I don't have a sense of urgency for them to sign a number 2. The goal or the agenda may be to sign a number 2 or to draft a number 2 in the upcoming NFL 2025 draft. My only problem with that philosophy is, are you really going to start the season with a 22-year-old QB1 and a 22 to 23-year-old QB2, and that's your quarterback room? Are the Minnesota Vikings comfortable enough to do that? I know KOC is a quarterback whisperer. But is that the best case scenario for the Minnesota Vikings, having two 22 to 23 years olds in that quarterback room? Like, that doesn't necessarily make sense to me. It may be part of the plan. Again, they're not talking. So I'm not going to sit here and say there's no way that's not going to happen. It very well could. Some people are speculating that they might trade for a quarterback to be the QB2. Are you depleting more draft assets for a QB2 when you can go out and sign a guy like Ryan Tannehill and it won't cost you anything? I don't know how much that makes sense either. There's also been speculation about the Minnesota Vikings possibly bringing back Kirk Cousins. Why you would want to give up an asset, a trade asset at all, for Kirk Cousins boggles my mind. But I don't know. That could be something that they are thinking. But to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense either. And it's funny that people keep putting Kirk Cousins in this backup slot, QB2, and that he would come back and he would be great. Again, acting like they've talked to Kirk Cousins, that he would be on board with being a QB2. When has Kirk Cousins ever said he would be comfortable being a backup quarterback? Hell, he's trying to get out of Atlanta because he's a backup to Michael Penix Jr. I think Kirk Cousins wants to play. But the Atlanta Falcons, they hold the advantage. They hold the hammer. They paid him his $10 million when they could have released him a couple of weeks ago. Now he's the backup quarterback, and he cannot show up to work if he wants, but they have control over his contract and over his rights. They've got to pay him all of that guarantee money. So in terms of the Minnesota Vikings bringing back Kirk Cousins, I don't know how likely that is to happen. So what are the plans for the Minnesota Vikings? It's a little bit weird, UP Nation. I'm not even going to lie to you. And again, I trust Kwesi and KOC, but the sense of urgency thing on not getting that QB2 thing done and letting more veterans go off the board is really intriguing to me. Isn't it intriguing to you guys, UP Nation? Like every week, a veteran is going off the board, signing with another team. Drew Lock just went off the board yesterday, going back up there to Seattle to back up Sam Darnold. Then we find out from Doogie, who is tapped in, we always say we shouldn't listen to the national media, but we should pay attention to our local guys. Doogie is one of our local guys and pretty tied in to everything. And so when Doogie comes out and says, really, there was no even dialogue between the Vikings and Joe Flacco, and it was more on Joe Flacco's representation part in terms of trying to get something done with the Vikings, that there was never really anything concrete or solid in place with the Minnesota Vikings. Again, that's another sign that there's no sense of urgency for this QB2 thing. Not trading for Kirk Cousins, saying no to Aaron Rodgers, right now saying no to Tannehill, and no dialogue between the Vikings and Joe Flacco. What are the Minnesota Vikings doing? What are they waiting on? When the draft happens, all of our questions may be answered. What is Aaron Rodgers doing? What is Aaron Rodgers waiting on? Like, he's got to want to play. And right now, the Pittsburgh Steelers, in terms of winning, is his best option. He's got a Hall of Fame football coach over there, man, and Mike Tomlin. And he's had dialogue, we've heard, with the Minnesota Vikings. And we've also heard that it was a pretty much one-sided dialogue of Aaron Rodgers making a pitch to come to the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings basically told him, no, we're rolling with JJ. Why, after that conversation, is Aaron Rodgers not signing or making a decision when spots are getting filled up? What happened? What was said during that last conversation with the Minnesota Vikings for them to show no sense of urgency in signing a number 2, and Aaron Rodgers showing no sense of urgency in signing elsewhere? Now, it could be Aaron Rodgers could be so egotistical that he may think, well, I'm Aaron Rodgers. If I decide to play, people are going to move for me. That hasn't been the case during this offseason. It's not like there's a lot of teams beating down Aaron Rodgers' door. And if JJ McCarthy's the guy and his knee hasn't been really tested yet, not on grass, as KOC would say, what are the Minnesota Vikings waiting for? Hypothetically, I don't know. It's a weird situation. There's more questions than answers right now. It's just a weird thing. It's just a weird thing. And all of you that watch Unconventional Playbook, the UPers out there, know that I'm 1,000% down with JJ McCarthy. I think JJ McCarthy, as I've said before, is going to be box office. And I'm glad that we're rolling with JJ McCarthy. I hope there's not another quarterback in 2025 other than JJ McCarthy. I hope it is JJ McCarthy 1,000%. But if KOC and Kwesi decide to make a decision, I guess I got to trust them. And right now, things are looking pretty good for JJ McCarthy. They've come out and supported him. They've given him, as they've been saying, a runway to grab the QB1 spot. It's just weird how everything is kind of continuing to swirl out there. And in times where you should have a sense of urgency because you have needs like that QB2 spot, Aaron Rodgers needs to find a team. There just doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency on any of the two parties. And I guess I just don't buy, unless Aaron Rodgers knows in his mind that he doesn't want to play for another team. Because we don't know, my speculation is that he does want to play somewhere, but he wants to play somewhere where he can win. Where he can win and possibly vie for a Super Bowl. He thinks he's still that good. That's what I believe. That he wants to play for a winner. If that's the case, man, the longer you wait, the more opportunities just dry up. The only thing that makes sense is if in Aaron Rodgers' mind, it is Vikings or nothing. It is Vikings or nothing. When you look at the QB spot for the Minnesota Vikings, UP Nation, I don't know what their whole philosophy is behind this. If you look at them trading for a veteran, who is that veteran? Let's just throw Kirk Cousins aside. Who is the veteran out there besides Kirk Cousins that you're going to make a trade for? It could be that KOC thinks, well, I'm the quarterback whisperer. Anybody that we bring in here, I can make it work. AKA Sam Howell or somebody like that. It's really intriguing. It's really intriguing. So I wanted to come on and I just wanted to get you to think about this thing holistically. Don't let your emotions guide you in terms of, oh, I don't want Aaron Rodgers or JJ McCarthy's too young or this will never happen or that will never happen. Man, the great thing about what we do is that everybody has an opinion. Nobody has a dumb opinion. But we can start to have conversations about these things and try to fit the pieces together. And here's what I know. Aaron Rodgers is haunting the whole process of the Minnesota Vikings moving forward. And I just don't know why everybody is so hesitant, Minnesota Vikings, Aaron Rodgers, and not showing a sense of urgency to get stuff done. I don't have answers. I just continue to have questions. Put your thoughts in the comments, man. What do you think Aaron Rodgers is waiting for? What do you think his plan is if the door is truly shut for the Minnesota Vikings? What do you think that last conversation was about? If the Minnesota Vikings told him absolutely not, we're going to roll with JJ McCarthy, what do you think that last conversation was between Aaron Rodgers and KOC to give Aaron Rodgers hope that this still may be a spot? Because if he had no hope, I would think Aaron Rodgers would have made and solidified a move right now. It's really weird. What are the Minnesota Vikings going to do at QB2? Put those in the comments, man. It's just a really weird situation, UP Nation. You got to admit, man. You got to admit. I am tired of talking Aaron Rodgers, man, but when you think of what's going on and how he is just lingering out there just for kicks and giggles, and you have the Minnesota Vikings that need a number 2, and they're not moving, and they have a nice little buffer of salary cap money, we don't know what they're going to do with that. And you got the upcoming draft coming up. What are the Minnesota Vikings plans, man? What are they going to do? Put your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear from all of you, man. I just think this is intriguing, and I have an idea of what's going on, but I don't want to speculate about that at this time. I just kind of want to throw some things out there to try to get people to think about this thing from every different angle and not just give you a tunnel vision perspective about Aaron Rodgers and the Minnesota Vikings. That's the beauty of this show, I think, because I just want to get a lot of ideas and just throw a lot of things at the wall to kind of see what is viable, what has a lot of validity, and what doesn't. And this whole Minnesota Vikings QB Aaron Rodgers deal, man, it's just a little bit fishy. It's just a little bit weird to me. I get bubble guts when I think about it. It's just really weird. But this has been Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Those that become members will have an opportunity to win a Minnesota Vikings Winter Warrior jersey. And as always, UP Nation, thanks for joining me. And we will see ya when we see ya. Go!